Well, Mel Stride is the Work and Pensions Secretary. He is the Cabinet Minister behind this policy for pensioners. Mel, you're very welcome to Talk Drive. Thanks for your company this Tuesday evening.
Thanks, Peter.
Tell me about this policy. What is the point of it? Some people have said, actually, you're giving another sop to a group which is actually very well protected, and those paying for it will be those in the workforce who have the highest burden of taxation in 70 years as a proportion of what the country makes. Is it fair?
The point of this, Peter, to your question, is that it's a core Conservative belief that we believe that people that work hard all their life should have dignity and security in retirement. And that's why we are the party that brought in the triple lock. And what that has meant is that pensions have risen, the state pension, by £3,700 between 2010 and now. But this announcement is going still further. And it means that we will be increasing what's called the personal allowance. That's the amount of income you can earn without paying any income tax, in line with those increases due to the triple lock. That will mean that we keep pensioners relying solely on the state pension out of income tax altogether in the future. And it also means that those who are paying some tax because they have other income in addition to their pension will be saving hundreds of pounds in tax over the coming years. Now, contrast that with what Labour has said today, which is that they have dismissed all of this. They've described it as desperate. Well, what it actually means is that Labour are prepared to now see millions of people that have worked very hard during their lives, who are pensioners, being dragged into paying income tax. It's a Labour tax on retirement, and that we don't think is right.
I want to put a thought to you from one of our viewers or listeners, Ian, who says, Peter, pensioners already don't pay national insurance. They get the winter fuel allowance. They get free bus passes. This gravy train has to stop. Pensioners need to be means tested. We simply cannot afford the quadruple lock, let alone a triple lock. What do you make to his sentiment there?
Look, when it comes to the state pension, people pay into their state pension throughout their lives, and I think they are entitled to a decent retirement, as I say, with dignity and security. And that's why we've stood by our pensioners, and we're going even further with the announcement today. But of course, that doesn't mean that on the tax front, we're not doing things for those people who are in work. Now, we announced, or the Chancellor announced, a huge reduction in employees' national insurance, slashing it by 1/3. What that means was a tax cut, which is being received in pay packets right now for 29 million workers, and an average worker earning the average wage will actually see a £900 tax cut as a consequence of that. So we are a party that is on a clear downward trajectory when it comes to taxes.
You may well, some may say you're on a clear downward trajectory when it comes to your electoral fortunes as well, Mel. And actually those two cuts that you referenced there to national insurance have not shifted the polls for you. Every bit of information we have, whether it is from polling companies, whether it is the local elections where the Conservatives did very badly, looks to the fact that this is a policy that will not be implemented because Labour will be the next government. We have one of your fellow ministers, Steve Baker, who's gone on holiday to Greece. You have 78 people who are leaving Parliament as Conservative MPs, some of them for very understandable personal reasons. But surely this is a sinking ship.
The only poll that's going to matter, Peter, is what happens on July the 4th, the general election. We have quite a way to go now before that election, about 40 days. A lot can change in that time.
But every single, sorry to interrupt you, Mel, but every single pollster would have to be wrong. Every single bit of information we have would have to be wrong if the Conservatives were to win this election. It would be the biggest upset in history. Surely that's a pipe dream for you as a Conservative to, I don't know if you're suggesting that the Conservatives are going to win the next election, but I mean, it's just not going to happen, is it?
So look, what I'm saying is the polls will be the polls. I'm not focusing on the polls. What we are focusing as a team, and there's hundreds of Conservative candidates up and down the country fighting for every single vote in this general election. I'll tell you why, Peter, because it really matters. It matters that we've done all this hard work to get us through COVID, when the economy shrank by 10% overnight, spending all that money through furlough to protect millions of jobs up and down the country, how we protected people through the cost of living crisis generated by the inflation that was visited to our shores due to the war in Europe. And we have turned a corner. We now have the fastest growing economy in the G7, jointly fastest in the last quarter. We have real wages increasing in each of the last 10 months. We've slashed inflation down from over 11% back to its more normal level of just over 2%. That mustn't go to waste. We cannot hand over the reins of power to a Labour Party under Keir Starmer. We have no plan, will take us back to square one, and really just have nothing to say. What they're trying to do, it's like the Ming vase strategy. You hold on to this poll lead, you mentioned the polls, like this precious Ming vase, you try and tiptoe across the slippery floor, being almost unnoticed as you do it. Well, that's not going to wash. And what we're going to see, I think, increasingly is Labour actually having to tell us what their plan is, because they clearly don't have one, and what they stand for. You know, no idea, care.
But you have told, you have told people. I mean, we've talked on you. You've given me good answers and full answers, and thank you for them on the pensions plan. But the national service plan seems to have just fallen apart. There seem to be so many questions still on that. I've asked numerous people, including Tobias Elwood, who came up with the plan in the first place, and the answer seems to be, well, we don't really know. Ask the Royal Commission when it comes up with its ideas. Do you really think that national service plan is going to be a winner, especially when you have a lot of 18-year-olds who look at the policy you've done today and say, well, the Conservative Party clearly cares about pensioners, but they don't really care about young people?
No, we absolutely care about young people. And that's part of the reason why national service, I think, is such a great idea, because it's going to give young people that sense of direction, the skills, the learning, the leadership skills, etc., that can be a foundation.
Do young people not have a sense of direction, Mel?
Well, look, if you look internationally, you look at Sweden, who have a similar kind of national service to that which we're considering here. 80% of young people that go through that Swedish national service come out of it actually saying they would be prepared to actively promote and encourage other young people to take part. So this is a huge opportunity. But you mentioned younger people. I've already raised the huge tax cuts that we brought in for those who are in work. That covers many young people who are benefiting from that. The national living wage.
You've raised a lot of taxes on working. You've raised a lot of taxes on working people in the last 14 years.
It depends. Well, it depends where you are on the income distribution, to get slightly technical.
It's
but if
it's the highest burden of taxation as a proportion of GDP in 70 years.
But Peter, it's beginning to come down. The reason it went up was we had to spend £400 billion protecting the economy and men and women and families right up and down this country from the challenges that we face, the once in a generation, once in a century challenges that we face. But we are now, because we've turned a corner economically, because we've got growth going, because we've got real wages rising, inflation down, etc., we are beginning now to cut taxes, really big tax cuts, actually, including today those that we've announced for our pensioners.
OK, I want your reaction to the news that Greater Manchester Police have said they'll take no further action against Angela Rayner. The Conservative Party have been very critical of her in terms of her housing arrangements. This has been a big story that has gone on for months and months now. What do you make of that development, Mel?
Well, what I've heard, and I haven't had a proper opportunity, Peter, to properly study the statement that I believe Greater Manchester Police have issued, but my understanding is that they have passed information on both to the local authority and also to HMRC. And I don't think I can comment any further than that, but clearly they've felt it appropriate to pass information on to two other bodies now.
Let me ask you your reaction to another political event today, a major political event. I just want to play the clip now of what the BBC said about Nigel Farage a little bit earlier. Let's play this clip.
He has said that this is now a matter of national security.
Nigel Farage with his customary inflammatory language there at a Reform UK press conference. He declined to stand for a seat.
Well, now the BBC presenter there, Geeta Gurry-Murphy, later apologised for saying that. What do you make of this controversy, Mel? Do you think the BBC is unbiased and impartial?
Well, I think in that particular instant, clearly the presenter said something that was inappropriate, and the BBC has apologised for that. And, I think that's probably the end of the matter. But, I think the BBC, as with all broadcasters, need to be, particularly the BBC, to be seen to be impartial. But I do think it's good that there appears to have been a fairly immediate apology that's been forthcoming.
Final question, Mel. I know you've got to go. One of our texters says the government can't afford to pay pensioners, but they can find £8 million a day to house illegal immigrants. I'm absolutely fuming, says Jenny. What would you say to Jenny, Mel?
Well, what I would say is that we can afford to pay the pensioners the triple lot. We can afford the triple lot plus and giving them some tax cuts and protecting them from tax rises. But at the same time, your texter is absolutely right that we are determined to get on top of both illegal migration and legal migration. We are seeing legal migration coming down quite dramatically, actually, and all the forecasts are suggesting a drop of about 300,000 people in total, and that's because of the changes we made to visa arrangements for those coming in, so tightening that up. On illegal migration, this is a case of stopping those boats coming across the channel, and we're doing that with our Rwanda legislation. So basically break the model to destroy the incentive that there is for people to come, so that they know that they will actually be removed on arrival. We have the planes ready, we have the airfields identified, and within a matter of weeks now, I think about 10 weeks or so, we will see those flights leaving the UK. How do I know that it works? Because we had a returns arrangement in place with Albania. And as soon as that kicked in, we had a reduction in Albanians coming here of over 90%. So we have a plan that's going to work. What have Labour said? They have opposed that at every single turn. They voted against the legislation all the way through Parliament. And I'm afraid with Labour, it will be an open door on immigration.
And I asked Yvette Cooper about that yesterday, the Shadow Home Secretary. But actually, you've spent £600 million of taxpayers' money on a policy that probably won't happen. We haven't actually had, apart from the one person who went voluntarily, any immigrants or would-be immigrants going to Rwanda, and those flights won't take off before the election.
Yeah, I simply don't accept that. We've and I followed very closely the legislation that went through Parliament. We have now passed that legislation. We are now geared up and ready to do that. And as I say, we've identified.
But Labour say it won't happen. Labour say it won't happen. They won't let it happen.
Well, they will. In fact, they've said more than that. Actually, they've said that if it works and is shown to work, they will still stop it. And that tells you all you need to know about Labour and migration. If you look at the kind of approach that Keir Starmer is leaning into, returns arrangements across Europe, you will see hundreds of thousands of more people in our country who we wish to discourage from coming here. This is a racket. These are people dying in the cold, dark waters of the Channel because they're being exploited by gangs. We've got to put a stop to that, and we've got to break the model that's driving it. And that's where the Rwanda legislation and the flights that we've got lined up, which will happen, are so important.
Mel, thank you very much. You've given us a good chunk of time. Really appreciate you coming on the programme. Lots of answers there, but some questions too.